this first key is one that I talked to prior to the Washington game, and obviously it didn't really hit with them. The first thing you got to do is you got to limit Saquon Barkley to singles and doubles. And I've talked about this a lot. He's so explosive, and there's going to be those plays where he gets 10, 15, maybe even 20, the single or double. You just can't have the 50 yards. And what did Washington do first play of the game? He goes for 65. But let's just look at him historically. So he's now at 9 runs of wow. 50 or more yards, and that compared to Adrian Peterson, Barry Sanders, and these are all within 1-score games. So the good news is that Kansas City's one of the better teams in terms of missed tackles. They're 8th in terms of missed tackles defensively. Now the bad news is Washington was 5th. So you can see that.
Hello.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a problem, down the field with dealing with them. But the other thing that comes into play with Barkley is he's got 77 plays this season where he's had 0 or negative yards. Okay, so that's a key component of this. If you can that's the most in the NFL by far.
So it's like he kind of is having a Barry Sanders season.
It is.
He's always been an element of that.
Yeah, so those 0 and negative yard runs, if you can have the singles or doubles, maybe those are mixed in, but then you get enough of those 0 and negative yard runs, Kansas City gets a little bit of a lead. Now Philly transitions from moving away from Barkley, which to me is a huge mistake. He typically gets better as the game goes on, but teams will panic, and they'll panic in big moments, move away from that, and now it becomes a passing game, which I think helps Kansas City.
So I'm shocked that the number of 77 runs for 0 or behind the line of scrimmage, because that does it. Stylistically, he doesn't remind me of Barry Sanders at all. But that was, for good or for bad, Barry's career. Like the argument in the 90s about Barry versus Emmett was, Barry was so majestic, but if you needed to pick up a 3rd and 2, you trusted one guy.
He wasn't even in the goal line.
Right, in goal line. And Saquon just strikes me as so much more powerful. Here's what I'll say about the Eagles versus the Chiefs. I'm sorry, Washington versus the Chiefs defensively before you get to your next one. It felt to me like Washington correctly played that game like, man, we're going to have to make splash plays on both sides of the ball. And because I thought that informed how they were trying to tackle Saquon, especially on that very first play. Like, they weren't trying to tackle him, they were trying to strip him. They didn't get it, and then he ends up, that had no business going for 70 yards. I don't think Kansas City is going to look at it like, we have to make this huge play defensively. I think they're going to look at it like, we can't let the huge play happen to us defensively.
Yeah,
Okay, so let's talk about this. I mean, obviously, if you're the Kansas City Chiefs, you want and need to limit Saquon Barkley, right? That's obvious. A little bit of revisionist history here about the Washington Commanders saying what they're going to need to do, because there was plenty of people saying that the Washington Commanders are just the better team with the better quarterback. So this whole idea that they needed these big splash plays on both sides of the ball, they didn't necessarily do that throughout the playoffs. So did they have big plays? Yes, but it's just like that wasn't a defining characteristic. They just were simply better than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They were simply better than the Detroit Lions. Not to mention the way how they kind of went after they approached the game is they were very consistent. Their game plan had been very consistent. So I'm just not entirely sure if that's the conclusion drawn from that game, and therefore now the Chiefs will be better per se, or that play had no business, like, because they were trying to do this or that. Like, that's just not really 100% accurate. I do think, like, I understand what Mangini's saying about limiting Saquon. You know, that it's okay to have him to the 10, the 20, and whatever, but it's really those big home run balls that they have to worry about, that they really have to limit. That's where I kind of disagree with. I think for the Kansas City Chiefs to win this game, or to just, none of this is for them to, like, win the game necessarily. It's just a massive positive that obviously really contributes and helps them, is really limiting to Saquon Barkley to the 1 and the 2 yard gains or the losses. It's getting that feeling of, Philadelphia Eagles can't get Saquon moving in the right direction. I think if Saquon Barkley is going for 5-10 yards, at a given clip, like that continues to still open up the offense for everyone involved. I think any positive yardage for the Philadelphia Eagles ends up being a mass run. Anytime you can hand the ball off and get 4, 5, 6 yards, that is a massive win. No matter who you are, no matter what team you are, no matter what quarterback you are, it is a massive win to be 1st and 10 and now be 2nd and 5, 3rd and 2. It's just huge to have it where you're 2nd and 8 and now you're 1st and 10 because of a 10-yard run. Like that's huge. A 1st and 10 handoff leading to a 2nd and 2, 2nd and 1, 2nd and 3, or even getting bailed out where it's 1st and 10, but now you have an incomplete pass, a bad throw, whatever it is, drop pass, just a good coverage. And so now it's 2nd and 10 and you hand the ball off and now it's 3rd and 2. That's massive. Even just 3rd and 5. That's massive. You run into the trouble when it's 2nd and 10. When you try to hand the ball off and now it's 2nd and 10, 2nd and 12. Or you have that incomplete pass and now you hand the ball off and now it's 3rd and 10, 3rd and 8. That's a weird. It's 3rd and 3 and you're like, we hand the ball off. Now it's 4th and 3, 4th and 4. So I really think that the Chiefs, to really limit the damage of Saquon Barkley is obviously, it goes without saying, you don't want to give up 60-yard touchdowns. Like, that's obvious, that goes without saying, but I just think if we're looking at it a little bit more situationally and just kind of zooming in more directly on it, I think it's a massive, massive, massive victory and pretty important for the Kansas City Chiefs to do that early on to really limit. Because if you saw where the Eagles defense, where the offense could get a little, less resilient, less powerful, is when Saquon was being tackled for a loss, or when there was some of those limitations on it, whether it be the second half of that Washington Commanders game in the regular season, a little bit with the Pittsburgh Steelers game. I think there was a little bit of sluggishness to the run game against the Packers in the playoffs. That is, I know Saquon broke off for a run, and that would have even been another bigger one if he actually just took it to the house and didn't slide. But there was a little bit of sluggishness in that game, and I'm sure there's a couple other examples that I just don't have off the top of my head right now. And I think that's when things can start to get a little tight. I do think that there is a grounding and calming feeling for the Philadelphia Eagles offense when they can get Saquon going. I do think that's a big thing. But again, make no mistake about it, the Philadelphia Eagles are more than equipped to work the ball in the passing game to AJ, Devontae, Dallas Goedert, etc. Not to mention, when you talk about some of these other teams that fail to commit to the run game against the Kansas City Chiefs, like whether it be the Buffalo Bills, for the bulk of a game against the Chiefs, or the Ravens in seasons past, or even this first season, or even the first game of the season, they were big play hunting. They were trying to get the ball to Zay Flowers or Likely or whoever, 45 yards down the field. They were doing boom or bust. They were going for these home run shots. That's not necessarily what the Eagles necessarily like to do. They will try to feed the ball and get the ball to AJ or Dallas or Devontae for these, 6, 7, 8 yard passes. They will do that. They're not just constantly looking for that deep ball. This is not the Pittsburgh Steelers with Russell Wilson, where it's just like, they either run the ball or Jalen Hurts has to throw a moon ball. That's not their offense. So you're still putting too much of a limited scope on the Philadelphia Eagles, but there's obviously going to be a huge emphasis for the Kansas City Chiefs to slow down Saquon Barkley, and that's why I'm curious to see what does Kellen Moore do to either use that against the Kansas City Chiefs or to mitigate that. And of course, if it does, because I have to imagine there's going to be at least a handful of plays where Saquon Barkley can't get going, or a couple drives. You're in the Super Bowl. You're gonna face adversity. You're going to face moments of uncomfortableness. It's hard to imagine that the Eagles just start this game and they hand the ball off to Saquon and he rips off a 60-yard touchdown. Like that's hard to see. Or just that Saquon just goes off for 200 plus yards and the whole time Tom Brady's just like, man, the Kansas City Chiefs have no answer for Saquon Barkley, and this Eagles offense is just rolling, and the score is 35-7. Like, I don't foresee that happening. So I have to imagine you're going to be watching that game, and there's going to be a back-to-back drives where it's like, oh man, Saquon just can't get going. Like, I'm curious to see then what Kellen Moore and the Eagles offense as a whole does, and kind of how they balance that out. But yeah, I do agree. Obvious. I mean, it goes without saying. Like, obviously, that's a major key for the Kansas City Chiefs to limit that. But I think even just limiting him to singles and doubles is, not enough personally. But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about the Philadelphia Eagles? One of the keys for the Kansas City Chiefs to beat the Philadelphia Eagles being to limit Saquon Barkley specifically to, just these, I guess, 0 to 10, 20-yard plays according to Mangini. Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment, so whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions. Let's get in some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We're building an amazing community here, and I'd absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to. Something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.